Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 25 of our reading of A Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent, a book by Marie Brennan. Now, as always, we're going to go over the copyright information, which should be on your screen right now. As you can see, this is A Natural History of Dragons, copyright 2013 by Bryn Noonschwander, all rights reserved, interior illustrations by Todd Lockwood, maps by Rhys Davies, and designed by Greg Collins. And in the last part, Lady Trent and the entourage went to the Boyers' hunting lodge, which is like basically a mansion. It's really huge. They are asking about Gaetano Rossi, who is the scholar and friend of Kursoff. Kursoff is the Boyer, and he's a high-ranking official. Has a palace and servants and all that good stuff. So, anyways, Isabella Camhurst, aka Lady Trent, doesn't really feel welcome there, and her husband Jacob agrees, and they don't know why they're there in the first place. Anyways, we are going to continue here. He is occupied with work, Kursoff said, attacking his soup, as if he, not we, had been writing for 3 days. Work? Lord Hilford repeated, with an inquiring tone. He is not here for leisure, then? Was it my imagination, or did Kursoff hesitate? It might only have been that the slice of beet in his spoon was too large and overbalanced back into the bowl. He cut it with the edge of the spoon and said, "Leisure, yes, but we have been hunting. The preservation of our trophies is his task." The conversation went on to bear, wolf, and other game, while I listened in silence. A young lady, of course, could not be expected to take much interest in such talk. But in truth, I was glad for the chance to observe. Kursoff's friendliness and good cheer was distinctly forced, I thought. He might be explained away by saying his Razesh had not warned him sufficiently about us. Now the Boyer felt obligated to play host against his own wishes, but my uneasiness grew. Kursoff did pause long enough to assure that this was not the promised feast that would come the following night. I wondered if it would be an improvement over what we faced now. Our dishes were odd, as if the cook was trying too hard or unsure of his work. He did not stint our expensive spices. I could not even recognize some of them, but the application was peculiar and sometimes less than successful. As with the venison, dyed a most off-putting shade by aggressive use of turmeric. I left most of it on my plate. Politeness be darned. Lord Hilford did tell the Boyer of our supernatural difficulties in Drustanev and their source. You say the lad ran? Kursoff said, and frowned through his beard. My men will hunt him down, or he will go back to the village. Either way, we will find him. I was hardly well disposed towards Astomir after everything he had done to disrupt our work, but I found myself hoping the young man was not taken up by Kursoff's followers. It sounded as if his punishment might be harsher than I would wish. From his seat across the table from me, Jacob said, "I suppose there hasn't been time yet to find traces of Jindrik Gretelkin." He could count the days as well as I could. The Boyer's men could scarcely have returned yet, even if they found the man almost immediately. Ladinsky must have been sent to Drustanev practically on Lord Hilford's heels. No, I thought, my husband has spoken simply to watch Kursoff's reaction. The man's lips thinned inside his beard. No, there has not. Gretelkin was supposed to be this man's agent, even if his primary duty was to collect the village taxes twice a year, which was the description Lord Hilford had given of a Razesh. Surely his title meant something. I'm astonished the villagers did not send. Uh, I'm astonished, rather, the villagers did not send to you when Gretelkin went missing. The boyar snorted, picking up his glass of wine. Likely they got drunk in celebration. They hate Gretelkin there. You know, the Razeshi are rarely liked, but every time he came to me with the taxes, more complaints. By the expression around the table, my companion's thoughts were the same as mine. They had heard nothing of such conflict, and yet it explained a great deal, including the general miasma of hostility that had surrounded us since our first moments in Drustanev. Living in the house of the hated Razesh, expecting him to be our local guide, must have tarred us with his brush. I wondered how much of that had been due to Gretelkin himself. As I had told the men, village gossip had made it clear that Kursov himself was not much liked either. For few of the Vestrani boyars were. They were Bolskoy interlopers, remainders of Vestrana's subject status, but Kursov made no attempt to hide his own disdain for the villagers of Drustanev. Everything about his establishment, even here at this summer hunting lodge, was Bolskoy, with no concession to local habits. Gretelkin, though, his was a Vestrani name. How did that figure into this web of tension? We will speak more of it tomorrow, Kursov said, rising from the table, and also of what you've been doing here, this research of yours. The servants will show you to your rooms. He did not even offer brandy as an after-meal courtesy. Lord Hilford murmured to Jacob and Mr. Wilker, I have some in my pack. And the men went off to cleanse their palates. I found Dagmar in my room, turning down the covers, scowling, fit to light the bed on fire. I had meant to ask her far sooner, but everything from the mob onward had distracted me. I wondered how badly I would regret that delay. Tell me about Gretelkin. Your people don't like him, I'm told. I received a glare of the sort that told me I was prying into village business, where I did not belong, but Dagmar answered me nonetheless. Why should we? She muttered, keeping her voice low as if she too felt the oppressive weight of this place. He made himself the boyar's creature. Too much reading put ideas in his head, and he said it would be better for Drustanev if he was Razesh, but he was just as bad as the one before him. I worked through this with lamentable slowness, hearing what she did not say. Was Gretelkin born in Drustanev? Of course, she said, once again filled with scorn for my ignorance. Had Lord Hilford ever mentioned that? He'd called Drustanev Gretelkin's village, but I had assumed the association a political one. A Vestrani man somehow positioned himself as the boyar's administrator, with grand dreams of benefiting the village. It made sense a local man would be more sensitive to local issues, more willing to advocate on their behalf and to forego behalf to the foreign overlord. But it had done no good. No wonder, with Kursov as he was, and worse, it had rebounded to ill. The people of Drustanev felt betrayed by his failure. It was truly unfortunate that Lord Hilford had chosen this, of all places, to conduct our research. It raised an unpleasant specter in my mind. Dagmar, would anyone kill Gretelkin? Anyone in Drustanev, I mean? For once, her fury came as a relief. What do you think? We are. Just because Astoria is an idiot playing those tricks, but you're outsiders. Half the village would say you deserved it. if he had been scaring us too. Again, I had to listen to what she did not say. Gretelkin was not an outsider then, even though he worked for the Boyer. I paced around the small room. The spring of my mind wound too tightly for me to rest, even though my body was tired. We're fair certain he's dead, Dagmara. He's been missing for too long, and there's just too much going on here. What about the smugglers? They're outsiders. Stollerin, have they been known to kill people? No, she said, but the word came out uneasily. Enough strange things have been happening that I could understand why. Lord Hilford had told me that a scientist must never reason ahead of his data. He thought the dragons had done it, and maybe they had. I knew well that it was my own partisan inclinations that made me not want to believe it, but there was another prospect in my mind, growing stronger each time another possibility was eliminated or reduced. Would the Boyer have any reason to kill him? Dagmira's response was incredulous. Why would he? Gretelkin claimed he'd made arrangements for us to visit, but it doesn't seem to have been true. Kurzov isn't happy we're here. That was hardly motivation for murder, though. My thoughts progressed further, and Gretelkin sent a message saying it was a bad time to come. What if he meant more than the dragon? What if he meant more than the dragon attacks? If the Boyer didn't want you here, she said, he could just order you to leave. That was true. However, its being true did not rule out other factors that might make Kurzov reluctant to send us away. I just could not imagine what those might be. I must have paced for some time without speaking because Dagmara gave me a pointed attempt at courtesy. Do you need anything else? Oh, don't be like that, Dagmara, I said, distracted. I wanted you here because something about this place sets me on edge, and I trust you, but no, I don't need anything else. Rest well, and I'll see you in the morning. She kissed my hand and went out. I lay down on the bed, but it was a long time before I managed to sleep. Chapter 22. Okay, we're 12 minutes in. Chapter 22. A ride with awkward conversation, draconic provocation, and the content of Kurzov's cellar. The next morning, as I went in search of breakfast, I encountered Rossi on the ground floor, emerging from some kind of cellar. He gave me an unfriendly look, though I nodded a polite good morning to him. Will you be joining us on our ride today? I asked for Kurzov had made mention of an excursion the night before. No, Rossi said curtly. I have work to do. Yes, so the Boyer said. Taxidermy. It no doubt accounted for the unpleasant smell that wafted along with Rossi. Would you be so kind as to show me where breakfast is laid? I asked mostly to annoy him. Breakfast, given the layout of the lodge, would be in the same room where we had taken our supper the night before, but I wished to make him behave like a gentleman. As the words left my mouth, though, the Chiavoran words, a thought came to my mind that jolted me where I stood. The bottles of acid had been labeled in Chiavoran. Under most circumstances, I would have called it meaningless. Called it meaningless coincidence. Drustanev lay on the southern side of the mountains, facing into Chiavora. Much of their trade went across the border. Naturally, any such exotic thing would be brought into Vestrana from the south, and Rossi's nationality could hardly be considered proof of guilt, except that the man was also, by reports, a scholar of some kind. He might be doing taxidermy for the Boyer, but that requires a knowledge of chemicals. Had Astomir's sulfuric acid ridden with us in the carts from San Verio, destined for the Boyer's lodge? I ate very low breakfast, sorting rapidly through the details of the possibility. Kurzov discovered the Skirling visitors to Drusenev were natural historians from the villagers, or from the smugglers. Chatskill's men were working with at least one minion of the boyar. They wished not to rouse curiosity by ordering us away, arranging the charade with Astamir, intending that it should cause us to be driven out. Or Rossi might have done that, but he was not a known figure in the village. When it failed, no, he sent Ladinsky before we discovered Astamir's perfidy. When Lord Hilford came inquiring into Gretelkin's disappearance, then at that point, Iosif Abramovich Kurzov resolved to deal with this more directly. I had no proof, but I had more than enough suspicion to make me very worried indeed. The only thing preventing worry from becoming outright panic was the unlikelihood of Kurzov wishing us dead. If that were the case, I reasoned Ladinsky could have done away with us any time those 3 days from Drusenev or upon our arrival here. It was not much to comfort myself with as we rode out to the boyar's as we rode out on the boyar's horses. Around mid-morning, Kurzov's own mount was a stallion that he controlled with a hard grip, but the rest of the horseflesh was uninspiring. My own gelding made heavy weather of some of the slopes, lurching up and down them, such that a lesser rider might have lost her seat. As it was, I found myself glad my divided skirt permitted me to sit astride. I feigned difficulty, though, so as to draw Jacob to my side. In brief snatches, as he steadied me, or chivied my horse on, I related my fears. I had no sooner finished than Mr. Wilker reined in at our side. He looked toward Lord Hilford and Kurzov, who were then turning their horses to continue on through a strand of fir, and spoke to Jacob in quiet Skirling. I don't like it. Like what? Jacob asked. He and I had kept toward the back, Like what? Jacob asked. He and I had kept toward the back, followed at a discreet distance by one of the boyar's men, but my shoulders tensed, fearing we made a suspicious group. He's been asking endless questions about our research, but I don't think he's interested in it, Mr. Wilker said. The Earl is being his usual self, holding back most of it because he hasn't yet presented to the colloquium but hinting all over the place that we've discovered incredible things, and yet Kurzov doesn't show the slightest bit of intellectual curiosity. I knew what Mr. Wilker meant about holding back. Lord Hilford had told us a lengthy story once about von Grabstrel, the fellow who had developed the theory of geological uniformitarianism. He unwisely shared it with a like-minded colleague before he was ready to make public his conclusions, and that colleague, someone or another, Beovers, had published a book on the topic first. It was a terrible feud at the time, though considered old history by the time I was a young woman, and of course it's all but forgotten now. Its effect, however, lingered in the paranoia of many scientists who feared others would steal a march on them. Frowning, Jacob said, I thought you said he had been asking endless questions. He has, Mr. Wilker replied, frustrated, but, Kurzov isn't a scholar. Surely you've gathered that. I don't think he cares in the least about the science. He only wants to know what we've been doing. Jacob and I exchanged worried looks. I thought it had to do with the smugglers, I said, even more quietly than before, but could it somehow be related to our research? Mr. Wilker gaze sharpened. What do you mean? I did not want to draw attention. Nodding to Jacob, I prodded my horse forward and let him give Mr. Wilker a precis of our suspicions, even more abbreviated than the one I had given Jacob. By the rapidity with which it concluded, Mr. Wilker's horse, choosing its path, detoured to the side of me, and the gentleman and I met each other's gaze. That wordless moment ended the minor war between us that had waged since I was added to the expedition back in Skirland. If I was right, if the Bowyer had killed his own Razesh for uncovering something he should not, and it had anything to do with our own work, then the points of friction between us were trivialities, not worth so much as another second of our time. Mr. Wilker was not certain I was right, and neither was I, but the possibility was too grave to dismiss for lack of certainty. The three of us were in accord. The three of us were in accord. The three of us were in accord then. It only remained to inform Lord Hilford and to devise some response. I left the former to the gentleman, while all three of us considered the latter. Soon, however, Kurzov and the others began hunting, bringing down several pheasants for our feast that night, and the crack of the rifles only added to my tension. How easy would it be for someone to suffer an accident, quote unquote, out here? I flinched when Lord Hilford fired without success at a fleeing bird, and found myself wishing the pheasant success in escaping. Behind the pheasant's line of flight, a little distance above us, a stormy promontory stirred. With menacing and predatory slowness, it expanded to either side, and because I had been thinking of the pheasant and its madly flapping wings, my first reaction was, hard though it may be to believe, to think anatomically, watching how the outer fingers of the wings spread first before the upper structure stretched out to catch the air. Then, belatedly, the rest of my mind pointed out that a dragon was about to stoop upon us. I cried out a warning, all the more frantic for being delayed. Two of Kurzov's men brought their guns to bear on the looming figure, but held their shots until it came into close range. My gelding shied. He may not have been born to the mountains, but he recognized the approach of this predator just in time. Oh, just the same. I swiftly weighed the likely outcome if I were on his back and flung myself from the saddle, diving for cover in a thick stand of trees. Because of this action, I failed to see what ensued. I could only hear and feel. Several shots rang out. By the cursing that followed, they had done no good. A shriek from above then heralded the dragon's attack. Branches snapped like kindling as it tried to seize its prey, but I heard no cries to suggest that it had met with any better luck. Kurzov bellowed orders in Bolskoy, probably for his men to keep shooting, and then a gust of wind raked through my pitiful cover, bringing with it a shower of needle-sharp ice fragments. If you must be the victim of a dragon's extraordinary breath, I recommend the rockworm. Its ice shards are capable of cutting the skin, but not deeply. The chief danger lies in the body's instinct to curl up tight against the sudden bone-aching cold. This renders one more vulnerable to the dragon's subsequent dive. Further gunshots told me that at least some of the men were still in a position to defend us. I forced my reluctant body to uncurl and peered out above the fallen branches. Jacob was alive. I sucked in a great gasp of relief. And there was Mr. Wilker and Lord Hilford. After them I spotted Kurzov and his 2 men. All seemed intact, and one final volley of shots brought a cry from above that might have been either frustration or pain. Whichever it was, it seemed to persuade the dragon to seek easier prey, for after a few tense moments we emerged from cover. All our horses were scattered, with the exception of the Boyer's stallion. For a wonder, none had broken their legs or necks, though Jacob's mount had gone lame. My idiot gelding surprised me by being perfectly fine, and I patted his neck soothingly. He might not have been pleasant to ride, but I was glad he had not been killed. Kurzov was spitting words in Bolshoi that I doubted were fit for a lady's ears. Lord Hilford asked him a question in the same tongue and got a curt answer. Translating for us, the Earl said, "This isn't the first attack we've seen, of course. He's quite vexing. They failed to bring the beast down, though for my own part, I feel it's just as well. We haven't any of our equipment with us. Such observations as we could make were hardly worth the effort." I'm going to stop that here. We have been reading from A Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent, a book by Marie Brennan. If you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me anyway, or if you want to join the Discord server, all the information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.